Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time and the past. It's a strange thing, and one that in times like these we probably long for more than ever. Although I do relate to this sentiment more than you can possibly know, I likely wouldn't take anyone other than the person that I am today, minus the chronic health issues of course. Yes, if we could transpose the current version of ourselves to past scenarios, then that's the choice that many would probably take. It would likely save me and others from unnecessary disputes and distress. However, at the same time, without many of those past scenarios, we probably wouldn't be where we are today. In many ways, it's a paradoxical conundrum, and the best you can do is be thankful for your present wisdom. As internet dwellers, we tend not to talk about our possibly tainted backstories too much, because other people have a nature to be quite judgmental. And if that's not who we are today, then what right do people really have to know? However, it's almost always important we keep the past in mind, because if not, we may be destined to repeat it, and for many people, that's the last thing that we want. With that said, there are some who will repeat it regardless, whether they know it's wrong or not. And for those individuals, well, we may have to be a bit more vocal in how we reprimand them. This is especially true if those individuals hold a relative amount of influence, as say, I don't know, a YouTuber with dedicated fans, probably serving as a role model for a fair proportion of them. What about when said drama involves your followers? Well then, let's discuss today's topic.
Dude, this movie is f***ing amazing.
God, these 3D special effects
Look
are so
how realistic it is, man.
Yeah, exactly.
When does Eddie Murphy show up? That's all I want to know.
He shows up right now, 3D.
Gamers unite. Yes, once more, we are heading back to that corner of YouTube to set the backdrop for today's discourse, and we'll begin by talking about one of the titans of the gaming community, Vanoss.
I was born in the darkness, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man, and by then, there's nothing to be but blinded.
Come on, Bane, fight me like a man.
Combo breaker! Oh, you are no! Oh, that's not fair. Bane was low on health.
Evan Fong, also known as Vanoss Gaming, is a creator who posts montage-style content of him and his friends playing a variety of video games. On paper, it sounds fairly unexceptional, but the editing and interplay between Fong and his comrades has garnered widespread attention from viewers, establishing his channel as a cornerstone in the YouTube gaming subculture that has flourished in the past decade. On his channel, he would feature a retinue of creators who would aid that back-and-forth energy that buoyed his content. This roster would evolve over the years, but one individual who became a pretty regular fixture on the channel during the mid-2010s was a gentleman by the name of Minilad.
We must save
Minilad,
We have to save him.
What?
we are going to save you.
Yeah!
Thank God.
But first,
What?
let's play with this new Batmobile toy.
Oh, yeah!
Yeah!
Not now.
Yeah!
Not now.
Yeah!
Craig Thompson, aka Minilad, is a British creator who, like many others from his era, amassed success through videos where he indulged his gamer tendencies. He set up his channel in 2011 while still in school, uploading mostly gameplay footage. He quickly made inroads into the gaming community, even being featured as the Gamer of the Week in iHas Cupquake's discontinued series. Nonetheless, it would be a couple years before he would achieve any significant prosperity, with ratings beginning to pick up at the turn of 2013, after which point his channel rarely lost momentum. In this time, Minilad also became rather involved in Vanoss Gaming's Banana Bus Squad, named after a vehicle in Grand Theft Auto 5. This was mostly composed of Vanoss's inner circle of collaborators, including many other prominent creators such as H2O Delirious, Moose Knuckle, Louis Caliber, and I Am Wildcats. With such an entourage, there was little doubt that Craig was certainly amongst the stars, and like many of his colleagues, his growth came quickly and substantially. As he passed each million milestone with increasing finesse, it appeared that he had mastered his niche. What niche is that? Well, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. When looking up what people enjoyed about Minilad's content, I wasn't met with an overwhelming deluge of answers. He was sufficiently inoffensive, decent at the games themselves, and did conceive some very original ideas. But most of his accomplishment appeared to be based on intelligent networking and a persistent upload schedule in an era where some creators do seem a little stale in hindsight.
There's too much Italian in here.
It's fine.
There's
It's
too much
fine.
Italian.
Keep your eyes on the
I
sky.
don't even
Keep
know
your
where
eyes
I
on the
am.
sky and not on my
After this.
mustache.
Now, this isn't to his discredit. In many ways, Vanos Gaming was the archetype of an extremely effective business model, and the fact that other people wanted to recreate it made complete sense. And like many of his colleagues, Minilad represented a clique of YouTubers that intelligently generated cyclical views through association and collaboration, which overall has worked out quite well for them. Whereas many gamers from that era may have fallen from their distinguished pinnacles, a multitude of creators involved with these squads have managed to retain a consistent viewer base, even if it's not quite what it used to be. Hell, in 2017, Minilad had one of the best years on his channel, capitalizing on the pivot to face cam and reaction-based content, likely acquiring a fair few new subscribers in the process.
I never want to lose that connection with you guys, if you know what I mean. And with that I mean I want to be able to like give back in a way. And that's why I want to go to all these conventions to meet you guys, and I want to do as many signings as possible, and I want to meet you guys and spend the most amount of time with everyone, and I don't know, I'll forever be thankful for everything you lads have gave me. It's just, life is a crazy ride.
Although Minilad's personality may not have been the most distinct, he was still held in high esteem by many within the community, most notably for the numerous charity drives he had hosted. For many, in a time where power seemed so prone to being abused, it was refreshing that there were still people like Minilad out there using their influence for the good of the world. He was a board member on the interestingly named Thirst Project, an organization focused on delivering clean water to deprived communities, also raising $150,000 over the space of 2 streams in 2018. Very admirable indeed. Nevertheless, it seems that Craig here still had a few steps to take to truly define himself as an individual creator. These steps were mostly taken in 2018, with his distancing from Vanos Gaming a couple years prior, the launch of his personal vlog channel, and undertaking of more ambitious ventures. It looked like Thompson wanted to alter his trajectory and be the master of his own destiny. As a creator, he had the capacity to stand on his own 2 feet, and no one who was going to impede this. No one other than himself, of course. But what was the chance of that happening? I think we were all ready to see what the true Minilad was capable of.
He is so good at manipulation, it is terrifying. It is so scary.
But there were a few complications, and what one may have hoped to be a new beginning gradually manifested into a spiral back down one's past, one that may not even be worthy of escape. So, my friends, I invite you to join me on a voyage which has many uncomfortable yet unnecessary steps, and I think we need to begin this endeavor as soon as we can. Let us go. In the gaming sphere, Vanos felt often like the root nexus, and with the applied formula to accumulate viewers between creators, an association was often formed. When many thought of Minilad, they thought of Vanos. It can't be a surprise with Minilad's numerous appearances on the channel. In many ways, it seemed to create an inalienable connection. Nonetheless, Minilad wanted to be his own creator, but to what extent would he go to achieve this? As aforementioned, one of the first moves that Minilad took to delineate his route was leaving Vanos Gaming. Now, in some senses, this was unexceptional news. He's not the first, and he won't be the last to leave a channel that has a rotating ensemble. He stopped appearing in their videos regularly around the turn of 2016, but still appeared friendly with many of their members, even releasing videos with them throughout the following year. It was generally accepted at the time he had left for reasons that were related to how he viewed himself in regards to the channel. He had spoken about this on Twitter previously and seemed insecure on how some people perceived him as Vanos' friend rather than his own person. However, given how involved he had been, there were obviously some who were going to be a bit taken aback. Not everyone was going to be aware of the assumed reasons, and eventually questions began to arise. As time passed, he appeared to fraternize with his former brethren less and less, and as distance grows, so will the volume of questions, with some even memeing those who were curious regarding Minilad's newfound independence. Now, nobody was entitled to further explanation. I'm sure there were many instances where someone had asked and Thompson had chosen to ignore the eager inquisitor. However, on one fateful day in 2018, our mini friend felt compelled to clear up any ambiguity hanging over the outstanding situation.
The only thing I want to ask is how come you don't play with Vanos Gaming?
Wow, because I don't play Gmod anymore. That's all he does. Question done. I'm also breaking off into a solo YouTuber because it's a lot more fun.
Now, Garry's Mod was a game that Minilad had found decent traction with back in the day, but by this point it had been popular for a long time. And although a lot of people still played it, it was understandable you may be a bit burnt out on such a pastime. Now, Minilad's statement was a hyperbole. Gmod isn't all they play, but at the same time the implication was clear that they didn't share the same interests anymore. This was certainly a surprise given the prior hypotheses, and some may have found his tone a little hostile, but that can equally be frustrating frustration or exhaustion at the continued questioning of a personal decision. At the time, Minilad was one of a substantial number of people to distance themselves from Vanos Gaming, which had led some to theorize about the imminent decline of the channel, with a few speculative claims here and there.
Still, no matter how close-knit the crew appears to be, there have been some events that caused and are still causing its downfall, so today we'll be looking into 10 reasons why the Vanos crew is potentially falling apart. The foundation of the Vanos crew was shaken when Craig Thompson, aka Minilad, decided to stop playing with Vanos and dissociated himself from the crew.
There was really nothing to supplement people's theories here. There had always been this slight tension between creators that had been picked up by observant fans, but disagreements happen. People can still be friends. There was a bit of drama being stirred up, and Minilad came forward to dispel those claims and affirm that he and Vanos were still friends, and there was no bad blood between them. With this in mind, the case went cold, and their bond at least seemed cordial. But how long would that last for? Well, let's fast forward to 2019, and Minilad was streaming, as he often does. Once again, he is sidetracked by the fact that Vanos are still uploading Gmod videos, prompting him to go off on a bit of a rant, with a tone of exasperation.
I also have no idea. They're still playing Gmod? Damn. After all this time, they're still playing Gmod? I mean, they kicked me out of all their chats, so I have no idea what the hell they're doing, so... They're still... Damn!
But okay, maybe I'd be a bit bothered if I was kicked from a chat with a bunch of people who I thought were my friends. It does seem a bit personal. But Minilad then has a few clarifications to add.
Just to clear up some shit. I wasn't kicked. All they did was play Fortnite and Gmod and then talk shit about other YouTubers, so I said f that. I broke away from that group. I'm doing my own thing. I've never felt better. My community's stronger than ever. I'm pulling more views than ever, and I'm personally a lot more happy as a human. So that's what happened. Anyways.
So he wasn't kicked. In fact, he left of his own accord because he wasn't happy with the direction of the chats. He decided to take a stand for himself. And now he is thriving. He's never been better, and you can tell it's true because you have his word. However, many would have found it strange he was once more saying this after all this time had elapsed. But this is what happens when distance grows between individuals. More slanted perceptions arise from how you reflect on situations as opposed to how they happened. With that said, if Minilad only held fond memories with the Vanos crew, it would be unlikely he would ever feel the need to malign them. It once more seemed like the surfacing of previously latent resentment towards his former posse, one that may have been around for longer than many assume. In 2016, before any of this drama transpired, a post was made titled "Some Things You Should Know About Minilad." It's presented through the eyes of a follower of Craig and the rest of the Vanos crew, and recounts a convention story where Mini appeared to be exhibiting some pretty seething jaundice for his popular colleague. The fan writes that not too long after the meetup, they overhear Minilad vocally tearing into Vanos for appearing late, while also making further comments concerning his status, including the claim that he didn't even like video games, and didn't start playing them until Call of Duty 4, the absolute noob. This person obviously defends Vanos for a plethora of reasons, and goes on to observe other instances where Minilad has decried an aspect of Vanos, the Banana Bus Squad, or their dynamic. They state that it seems to be a pattern of distaste that he has displayed for the crew, and that others should be cautious as to the reliability of what he says due to the underlying animosity. Now, this is just a personal account. However, it is aged rather well due to details we'll discuss in a bit, so I doubt it was written with the intent to mislead, and it would explain past and present behavior pretty accurately. So let's bring it back to 2019, and Mini's newfound groove in doing better than ever has clearly made him more outspoken.
That poor man's never gonna live that down. Poor bastard.
And to an extent, it was true. Minilad had rarely been more successful than where he was in April 2019. It seems that his confidence had reached a point where he was ready to disconnect from the Vanos crew altogether, and this diatribe served as the severing blow. However, with his remarks, Minilad, by all intents and purposes, ended any possible good faith between the two parties that may make him hesitant to speak out. Nonetheless, this was just an aside comment. What could tangibly follow from such an inconsequential statement?
Why isn't Craig in the server?
Well, Trash talk doesn't go too far in the gaming community, given that it's part of the culture in many ways. Now, of course, this isn't just in-game swordplay, this was an individual pretty savagely laying into his former friends. At the same time, this was a comment on a stream, not a formal upload loaded with serious allegations. It wouldn't really warrant a belated response on its own basis. Besides, Minilad had made similar comments the year before and nothing had come of them. Drama between creators in a community that doesn't really have a desire for it is seldom beneficial for either party involved. However, just because it's not beneficial doesn't mean it's not going to happen if someone feels inclined to express themselves.
I think I'm in the wrong movie.
God damn it.
This is Terrorizer, or Brian. He's a creator who has played with Vanoss and many of his associates, but is also in part known for his voice impressions, which range from celebrities such as Arnold Schwarzenegger to composite characters like Asian Guy. A Vanoss favourite, I'm sure. But I digress. He had previously collaborated with Minilad on videos, appearing to be on friendly terms with Craig up until 2018, when, like many others associated with Vanoss, he stopped appearing on the Minilad channel. Now, Minilad wasn't the only individual questioned over the ostensible disintegration of the relationship between two parties, but until June he had been the only person to really speak about it in a passionate way. As noted, many creators involved with Vanoss strike one as rather drama-averse. This is not the first time conflict has arisen between one of their colleagues. I'm sure it won't be the last, but few had sought to leave their input up until that point, likely knowing the risk of unnecessary quarrels. Someone like Vanoss, known to be quite withdrawn from public life, would certainly not be compelled to defend himself. However, in one June stream, facing questions once again from eager fans, Terrorizer made the decision that actually, he wasn't going to hold back his feelings any longer.
Why isn't Craig in the server? Because he doesn't play with us anymore. He went off and left us and then started bad-mouthing us. So he doesn't play with us anymore. You can't have it every way. So we play with people who have not left our chat. We have a chat, he left it, and he doesn't want to play with us. That's a question for him, not us.
Now, his comments don't exactly contradict those by Minilad. However, his tone and phrasing demonstrate a clear disdain for what Mini had purported in his stream. However, as I'm sure he was aware, such a comment would not quell many supporters' angst, and would almost certainly lead to more questions than answers. Given the now noticeable tension between the two, people's curiosity persisted, and in August 2019, when asked again, Terrorizer resolved to elaborate on his previously expressed sentiments. However, they didn't appear to be any more affectionate.
Why not invite Mini? I'll tell you why. He doesn't play with us. He left. And then he decided on stream to badmouth myself and my friends. Well, mainly just my friends. And I didn't appreciate that. So, I don't play with the guy lately. Because he's going on his meme streams talking shit about us. It's not cool. So, that's why.
In spite of this, however, it seems that Terrorizer didn't want to talk about it much further, declaring that he didn't want to stoop to Craig's level.
I think he said something on the live stream that about our girlfriends, which I kind of think is a bit of a cop-out.
But I don't like it's not a fair conversation to have when another person's not here. You know, you guys coming to me, I could give you very biased opinion and stuff, but he went off and he said some things on his live stream which really kind of annoy me about our group of friends and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know, just I wouldn't imagine, I don't like people doing that. He said some stuff, and I don't want to resort to start saying stuff in my live stream about stuff. So with respect to you guys, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I don't want to go into it, man, honestly. It's no disrespect to you guys, but it's none of your business.
Now, honestly, I do not know what level I'd class Craig's comments as. They're nothing too defamatory, but I suppose as the person who made allegations about the nature of Vanoss and friends, there was still a bar set, and at that point, Terrorizer hadn't really done anything other than present his own version of events, and chose not to take it further, which is fair enough. But unfortunately, Minilad had other plans. Yes, on August the 29th of 2019, Craig released a statement to Twitter with the intent to clear the air. However, this post doesn't exactly tell the story that we've seen so far. He starts off by announcing the intent of this post, that being to address the rumors that he hates everyone he used to play with, but quickly turns his attention to the visible friction between him and Terrorizer. Craig explains that this was in part because at the 2018 E3 convention, Brian made disparaging remarks regarding Minnie's mental health, and then reinforced his comments in spite of Minilad's discernible anguish. Since he had not apologized, Minilad no longer considered them on friendly terms. However, Craig goes one step further, alleging that Terrorizer had been disseminating misinformation on his streams about how Minilad was now at odds with much of the Vanoss fleet. He rebukes this and provides anecdotal evidence which contradicts this narrative, and affirms that he is still affable with Evan and many others who are active on his channel. Although Mini is unhappy at having to publish his thoughts on the matter, he knows that people will be better off for being aware of this, and still wishes the best for Brian on his endeavors. With this, he signs off. A testament to Mini's class and maturity. I'm sure we can all agree. But wait, wasn't there something we missed?
All they did was play Fortnite and Gmod and then talk shit about other YouTubers, so I said f that.
Ah yes. Minilad omitted some pretty essential details which are necessary to understanding how the situation precipitated. That being, he was the person who chastised Vanoss in his own streams, with his comments implying that they were at best elitist and at worst rather petty. For him to suddenly frame Brian as the instigator as if he had attacked Mini unprovoked is dishonest and pretty slimy on his behalf, particularly given how it could have affected Terrorizer's friendships with the Vanoss circle. I also found it interesting how Minilad was more comfortable referring to Vanoss as a collective now that he was no longer part of the channel. Minor observations aside, why would he frame it in such a way? Now, of course, the obvious answer would be to shield his image. However, as a seasoned creator, he must have been aware of the ramifications when people found out that he had twisted much of the information, right? Well, not entirely, because at the time there wasn't really much of a clear record of what had been said, and Minilad could have easily just passed the responsibility of rumors onto viewers who presented him with a one-sided portrait. Now, in due course, a compilation of Mini's comments would be uploaded to one place, chronicling the saga in rather clinical fashion. But until then, although the evidence could be unearthed in certain places on YouTube, it was often overrun by Minilad's rather smart tone, the reasonable voice. He knew that many people wouldn't want to pick a side, so in spite of the gross misrepresentations, many felt sympathetic to him and his point of view, seeing his reasoned tone as an indicator of good faith. On top of this, many felt that his reasons for distancing himself from Terrorizer were valid. After all, it's just not right that someone would make such comments about mental adversity pertaining to another person's life. And as a long-term advocate for mental health, it was understandable that many would take offense to that, especially if Brian hadn't subsequently budged on his position. But was this the full story either? With the flaws in Minilad's statement, Terrorizer was quick to respond on his Twitter account, firstly quote-tweeting it with his own retort, expressing discontent at many of Mini's aforementioned misrepresentations, while also drawing attention to Craig's recollection of comments Brian had made towards him, asserting that our gamer friend's portrayal was pure slander. Mini responded shortly after, stating that it was a near quote, once again affirming it was the reason that he stopped speaking to Terrorizer. He then says that if Brian wishes to resolve it, then they can talk over DMs. After all, we wouldn't want a spat in public for all the fans to see. However, Brian once more calls Mini out on this, observing the hypocrisy of making a call-out post accessible to the community before requesting the discretion that he couldn't previously provide his former friend. Then, in quite a surprising twist, another one of the Vanoss crew decided to impart their thoughts on the matter. You know that group that Minilad claims to be on such good terms with? Well, it seems that Dahi Denogla was not ecstatic about Mini's behavior, and in a reply also called Craig out on his double standards, contending that if he wants to talk it out in private, then he should delete his tweets, a fairly valid point. Mini responds that Brian's point of view is already on YouTube and people deserve to hear his side as well. Dahi then responds requesting this evidence, and unfortunately, as Mini has deleted his tweets, I'm unsure of whether he ever obliged and subsequently provided. But whether he did or not, it wouldn't have changed the fact that Mini had instigated this long before. Dahi and others were picking up on this and applying a reasonable amount of pressure to good old Mr. Lad over here. A lot of fans, however, were clearly upset and disappointed that two people who they both greatly admired were squabbling on their timeline, and in these situations, the easiest way to yield a resolution is to take it to the DMs, and many advised them to do so. A lot of the audience did not want to pick sides, and I empathize with that greatly. As a fan, I would be upset as well. However, this wasn't a case of differing perspectives. This was a situation where one person had greatly misrepresented another, and although although I tend to use words like slander a bit more carefully, it was still a very smarmy post that morally postures a fabricated position, embedding itself in subtly self-aggrandizing narratives to distract from its actual lack of content. One of those being the narrative of mental health, a topic so close to Mini Lad's heart. Now, if Mini was as concerned about mental health as he claimed to be, he'd be aware of how such a post could affect another individual, their fan base, and their working relationships, and as we'll find out later, he does know exactly how it operates. Now, if he was genuinely under the impression that Terrorizer had said everything he had claimed to unprovoked, then maybe it would have justified a response. But it's very hard to circumvent the fact that Mini started this well before, and there was no way he could not have been aware of that. Terrorizer was clearly upset at these claims and subsequently published a very comprehensive twitlonger responding to Craig's initial assertions. Some of the post explains his position in a way that we would expect it to, framing his comments as a reaction to Mini's in-stream obiter-dicta. This is all fairly unextraordinary. We know what transpired here. However, one question mark still lingered over the nature of their run-in at the convention the year before, the one where Mini Lad alleges that Brian had made rather deprecating comments towards his mental state. Terrorizer wholeheartedly repudiates this though, not just rejecting the idea that he had hectored Craig, but recalling the times that he had supported Mini in his mental hardship. He expands on why he hadn't responded to Mini's messages, regarding them as mostly inconsiderate attempts to elicit an apology. He talks about the quote, Mini's subsequent backtracking, and the hypocrisy of Craig's expectation of private resolution after making it public himself. Stuff we've also discussed, but having Terrorizer's testimony backed up with the corresponding evidence only further entrenched the idea that Mini Lad had purposely distorted the circumstances surrounding their ongoing conflict. However, on top of this, it implicated Mini as not merely insensitive to much of what he claimed to hold dear, but as weaponizing it in an attempt to damage the reputation of someone he had bad blood with. It was rather tasteless behavior, and whether his fans were on his side or not, he had likely shot himself in the foot with many of his colleagues and collaborators who would evaluate the happenings with a more critical eye. The whole situation is kind of sad, to be honest, and Terrorize himself was clearly troubled by the disputes.
I'm just trying to, have fun, play video games and do stuff, and then to have someone that you thought was a friend to like try and get themselves out of a situation, try and put that label on you is
Mini would later claim the drama had been patched up in another video.
I got to finally meet up with Brian. We're figuring things out. We talked backstage at Evan's show and we shook hands and we're gonna work on it. So I miss the dude and it's good to see things coming together.
However, Brian denied this and stated that he felt Craig had made these comments to appease audience members who may feel uneasy about the incident.
I know he made a video saying we're patching things up, which is not true. I feel like he says things in order to kind of get flack off of his back. Hence why he threw me under a bus in order to, get himself out of a situation that was happening with a trending video.
It's a strangely deceptive practice on his part, and although he would eventually release a semi-apology, his handling of the situation, even in representing the reconciliation, seems surprisingly insincere. Mental well-being is an important part of everyone's lives. I don't think I can emphasize that enough. We are often taught to do what's best for ourselves, which, although true, may not always mean what a person thinks it means. Mini Lad has spoken profusely about the topic of mental health, and the challenge that it regularly posed to him. He had made multiple posts alluding to it and raised money for charities that operated in the field. But this behavior seemed to not just discard, but abuse these principles, begging the question, did mental health really matter to him, or was it just a vehicle to help him further his status? And was this behavior even exclusive to the subject of mental health?
It's all good to try and fix something in DMs, and then it just then what about the people who still think I make fun of mental health and don't care and I did that to him? It's not going to go publicly and say, hey, actually, look, maybe I was wrong or something. No. So that's that situation. That sucks.
Well, we would soon find out. In the following months, Mini would continue his charitable endeavors and selfless ventures, winning plaudits and even awards from across the board. But you wouldn't be blamed if you'd been left with a slightly sour taste in your mouth from what we'd just discussed. However, at the end of the day, it was one drama, and regardless of what can be said about Mini Lad's demeanor under those conditions, you couldn't use it to define his legacy. No, you'd need something much more substantial for that. And after such a skirmish, Mr. Thompson would probably want to stay as far away from drama as possible, but maybe his fate had already been sealed. The past is a funny thing. Time may age it in the mind of some, but in the internet era, its significance is often only as relevant as the awareness of its existence. Therefore, when you acknowledge it, you are in effect making the past the present. This principle is what has yielded, for example, the contentious cancel culture, because although individuals involved may progress past the incident, when it's uncovered, many feel inclined to judge it in the current context of today's ecosystem, which can often be starkly different to the environment that prevailed all those years ago. However, some actions have always been wrong, and will likely continue to be wrong for the rest of time as long as we can possibly conceive, and the surfacing of such allegations will often lead a creator to being held to account, whether they would have preferred to leave it behind or not. So let's bring it forward to the present year, where like many other people, our good friend Minilad had been struggling, even taking a break at the start of the new decade.
Hi! Been a minute.
At this time, Minilad had went through a rather tough breakup with his now ex-girlfriend, Sammy, or Suni Day. This became quite an emotional affair and led Craig to take a hiatus from social media and uploading altogether. They had been in a relationship for approximately 2.5 years, so it was rational for him to be a little distraught over such misfortunes. He published a tweet on the 4th of January informing people of their split, before posting another a week later apologizing for the impulsivity of the former and any superfluous distress that it spawned amongst those close to him. This is then followed by the hiatus, lasting just over a month, with a video posted on his main channel to celebrate his long-awaited return and reflecting on the reasons behind this respite.
I struggle a lot with mental health issues. You know, it's not something to just kind of brush aside. It's something that you need to take seriously, otherwise it's gonna catch up with you. And that's exactly what happened. So I was on tour. I was rushing videos out. I was just putting up anything I could. I wasn't proud of the videos I was putting up. I was just, take this, yeah! And then I came back from tour, and then Sammy and I broke up.
In the video, he talks a lot about the developments in the previous months, the most notable being the separation, which he presents as difficult but amiable. He also takes the time to clarify some of the uncertainty surrounding the circumstances of the breakup. Not that the audiences were entitled to know, but it seemed to be a better option than letting people draw their own less lenient conclusions and perhaps voicing them as well.
I'm not gonna get into too much. Sammy has the dogs. A lot of people were like, oh, give Craig the dogs back. It was a mutual decision for Sammy to take the dogs, so please don't bug her about it anymore. Are we still friends? Yeah. You know, it was a clean breakup in the sense that we don't hate each other. It's not like we're blocking each other or talking shit or whatever.
As long as these were details that the pair were happy with divulging, then as uploads go, it was a mature, informative piece which handled the sensitivities of its subject with care and diplomacy. And many paid him the due respect that such conduct would warrant, while respecting his will to share as much as he felt comfortable sharing. This was the right time to clear the air.
I'm excited for this year. Oh, I can't tell you. I can't. But just trust me, this year's gonna be amazing.
Over the following months, Mini returned to his regular upload schedule, releasing the quality content that quenched his audience's desires. However, there was trouble on the horizon. What did this trouble entail exactly? Well, let's go back to the old 2016 Tumblr post. You know, the one that recounted Minilad's slightly less than professional behaviors with Vanoss. In the penultimate paragraph of the post, while continuing to document evidence of Minilad's strained relationship with the Vanoss crew, the author also observes that they had seen a pattern of Craig mingling with younger, and dare I say it, underage fans. They say this isn't anything incriminating on its own, but it's worth noting given the trend. With that said, this wasn't the first time that he had received flack for his interaction with his fans. In fact, in January of 2016, Mini partook in an exchange with the infamous Keemstar over comments he had made towards another Twitter user in the DM. This was during Keem's internet crusade phase, which led to a lot of allegations, sometimes correct, sometimes not so correct. So people took what he was saying with a pinch of salt. At some point after this, Keemstar deleted the tweets and nobody archived them, so I didn't think I was going to find anything here. However, I am a tenacious man and I found some of the interactions alongside one tweet with the images in question. And I must say they are something else, given that once again this individual was alleged to be an underage fan. I'll add alleged. His behavior seems unbelievably inappropriate, framed through the lens of helping this person. No, don't be sad. You have nice boobs. Somehow, he got off the hook here. I think because people were preoccupied with other controversies such as Lie Maker, Keemstar himself ended up in a controversy after running the infamous RS Lauren Gold story, overshadowing many other situations at the time, and Minnie's dismissive responses clearly worked in subduing any public arousal, and he lived to fight another day. Nonetheless, it was clear that not everyone was ignorant to Minnie's occasional improper fraternization with younger audience members, and although these rumors evanesced in the years succeeding, there was likely a suspicion that lingered within the pockets of the internet, and come 2020, much of that misgiving would prove not entirely unfounded. So let's bring back Craig's ex, Suni Day, of whom Minnie had a rather extensive relationship with. In mid-June, the mistreatment and harassment of female Twitch streamers became a pretty prevalent discussion in many online circles. And as a female Twitch streamer and victim herself, Sammy decided to impart her insight on the matter. Completely acceptable. However, this alarmed Craig, as from his perspective, given their rich history, many would assume that he was the person Suni was referring to, and thus he anxiously reached out, requesting that his former partner clarify that he had not violated her in such a way. Suni obliged, but in turn adding the caveat that this did not absolve him from other misdeeds that were present, including lies and manipulation, even sharing some DMs, which although do not say too much on their own, certainly don't paint the split as friendly and mutual as Minilad had communicated in his video. Yes, in clearing up one ambiguity, this tweet had revealed information that would inspire others to speak up, with much more damaging implications. So allow me to introduce you to two individuals. This is Hallie and this is Ash. Both of them were fans of Minnie and both have publicly confabulated with the YouTuber on numerous occasions. Ash until the end of 2017 and Hallie right up to 2020, the latter having consistently lent her support to Craig in his online pursuits. However, it seems that their experience with the award-winning creator had a bit more background than one may expect, and on June the 22nd, following Sammy's all-revealing tweet, both took to my favorite social media site to share their stories. Publishing via Twitlonger again, Ash and Hallie lay out their less than stellar encounters with the creator, alleging multiple counts of improper behavior with them, not just as fans but as individuals who were not of age. Now, this wasn't already the best look for our friend. However, it didn't stop there. In fact, it was barely the beginning, and that's not good when you're already 11 pages into a script. Now, these stories tell a tale we are all too familiar with on this channel, presenting Minilad as a person who, burnt by the then recent collapse of another relationship, turned his attention to those online to fill a void, specifically those from within his fanbase. In this instance, the implication is that he specifically targeted younger fans, knowing their vulnerability and the power he held over them as a creator. We can't provide too many specific dates, but this appears to have transpired throughout 2016 mostly, and around the time he was reported on the Tumblr post to be socializing in many of these circles. It is also alleged he had used his power to bargain for explicit content, which few would already condone, but is particularly objectionable considering that Hallie and Ash were both around the age of 16 or 17, not being of legal standing to send such content in the first place. However, these are elementary testimonies, and although it would be easy and justified to call Minilad out for such debauchery, something that I will have no qualm in doing, I'd like to evaluate a few more details that would catch one's eye. However, to take this discussion forward, or to even work from the premise of truth, we'd need a bit of substantiation behind these claims. But Ash and Hallie were well equipped, dropping screenshots of DMs from multiple platforms covering various points in their contact with the gaming icon. In their Twitlongers, both individuals appear quite convinced that Minilad was consciously taking advantage of them for his own purpose. Now, the word conscious there is pretty pivotal in the construction of that sentence. Minnie was not going to be treated gently with these revelations regardless, but to be frank, the actual evidence made him look even worse. Firstly, we'll turn to Ash, who released a series of screenshots dating from around the time where much of this misconduct is said to have occurred. This not just helps in corroborating much of their assertions, but also many of the judgments. Minilad's behavior may merely be unbefitting in some, such as his messages to the group chat, but look beyond that and you'll see some pretty repulsive and manipulative behavior, which clearly shows Minnie's awareness of the rift in power between the two parties in question. Probably the worst conversation captured is this one, where Ash clearly shows reluctance to share explicit images, understandably so, and Minnie begins to encourage her in the way that a mentor would one of their students. You can do it. I believe in you. Take the leap and send me nudes. It is preposterous. If someone doesn't feel comfortable, you respect that boundary. And as outlined in the tweet longer, this is not something that they would have done if it wasn't an individual with the clout that Minilad has. And to me, it seems that Mini was quite aware of this. It also doesn't help that Mini holds what a person said when they were drunk over them, as if it was some kind of ironclad pact. He also guilt baits by saying that he's sad, which is another thing I've never been a fan of in general, because it shows a lack of consideration for how the other person may feel. In certain circumstances, I can understand how it could be read in banterous fashion, but not when it deals with the exchange of such matter. This is not mutual, it's nasty, coercive, and shows a prioritization of personal gratification over respect for the other party's autonomy. This is also supported by much of the individual testimony, which focuses on how Minilad regularly used his depression as means to acquire what he desired. There's every trick in the book here, and I want you to keep this in mind going forward, not that it would be easy to forget. There are multiple DMs on multiple platforms and messaging services with the individuals involved that support these claims, involving both parties where Minilad has sent and received explicit images, alongside video verification confirming the accounts belong to Minilad. This was already compelling. In a way though, Minilad's 2016 antics were only half the story, because when word of his behavior began to make its way through these smaller communities, many sought to suppress these testimonies, including Minilad himself, employing a plethora of strategies highlighted in screenshots posted by Hallie. In these images dating from the end of 2017, Hallie decides to confront Minnie about Ash and the nature of their relationship, asking some exploratory questions to gauge their connection. In his responses, Craig downplays any intimacy, preventing inferences from being drawn regarding the content of their conversations. However, a few days later, the tone of this discussion had shifted, and Minnie is pleading with Hallie to prevent this information from being publicized. My favorite line here is when he says that there was nothing more than a specific message, before adding, and maybe a bit more of similar, just to cover himself in case there were some additional exchanges exposed. Who knows? Maybe there was. I don't know. How would Minnie know? He barely remembers who Ash is. Hallie frames a lot of this dialogue as manipulation on Minnie's behalf, and it's quite easy to see why. With the threat of incriminating evidence being released, he appeals to a lot of the consequences that he will face. Now, his line of reasoning isn't incorrect here. There will be significant ramifications if these details were to be dispersed, and he has a right to be worried about that. But it's an observation, not an argument, and it can't really be used as a point against the publication of such content. Hallie makes it clear that she's aware of the consequences, and Minnie reiterating again and again how awful it would be for him just seems to be an attempt to take advantage of the good faith that Hallie shows him, and the sympathy that she may feel for the remorse he expresses. This is a technique that is applied on multiple occasions when discussing the issue. A few days later, Minnie was caught in another lie. When sent a screenshot from a Snapchat conversation, he admits that he is one of the participants, but then proceeds to claim that Ash had lied about her age. That would be a decent rebuttal if it was the truth, which it wasn't. And a few days later, Hallie challenges Minnie once more on this fact, and this time he buckles, admitting that he knew she was 17, but that he was really depressed, and that he just thought if he was gonna end it there, he was gonna go out in a blaze of glory with lewd Snapchat DMs. Wow, real kamikaze mission there, Craig. It was rather desperate stuff on Minnie's part. However, Minilad wasn't the only person attempting to conceal his wrongdoings. In fact, some of the mods from his Discord server decided to take it upon themselves to defend their king's honor. Some adopting the "there will be repercussions" argument, others claiming that he had changed. Both points of view espoused by Minilad himself. I found a lot of these explanations quite embarrassing given the additional context. With that said, it was clearly effective as no one ousted him publicly at that time, and many clearly did believe that he deserved a second chance. However, that second chance was all used up by the time that Suni Day had informed the internet that Minilad's antics were still prevalent throughout their relationship, which is what had inspired Ash and Hallie to share their stories. Over the years, he had continuously pledged to improve, to seek help, and as it became clear that he had merely used their pity to preserve his public image while not actively changing his ways, their charity had diminished, and this was the breaking point. Beyond that, this was their ultimatum to Craig, and Minilad could no longer postpone his judgment day. Both Ash and Hallie clearly had extremely unpleasant experiences with the creator at the center of this debacle. But there's a real poignancy in particular to Hallie's testimony, because it's clear that she wanted to believe that Minnie had changed more than anyone else, and that really the most frustrating facet to her were all the lies that followed the scenario which she had taken at face value. She gave Minnie an opportunity to improve. She provided her support to his endeavors, and he took advantage of it. These were their stories to tell, and they didn't tell them with the intent to destroy his career. If they had felt Minnie had changed his ways, then I think they probably would have let him be. However, to them, with the discovery that this behavior had been present in his most recent relationship, even being instrumental to its demise, it was more than ample evidence that his word could not be trusted. With it out in the open, Minnie Lad would have to convince a much less sympathetic internet that he would rehabilitate himself. A harder sell for sure, and many who read the allegations didn't see a way back for Minnie at all. To them, this was unforgivable. And to be honest, it's hard not to see it from that viewpoint when you look at how he manipulated those around him. How could we trust what he says to anyone past this point if he can't even be honest with those closest to him? Well, to be honest, the only way would be if he had actually practiced what he preached. And with the allegations garnering traction, Minnie had no other option but to address them, releasing a statement, accepting full responsibility for his actions, and unreservedly apologizing for the hurt that he caused. Nonetheless, that was the easy part. It was going to be challenging for Minnie to deny the allegations at this point given their substance, and even from a strategic standpoint, it was the sensible thing to do. So a confession doesn't warrant too much kudos here. What really mattered were the steps that he was going to take to make amends. In Hallie Switlonger, she said that she legitimately thinks Craig is a good person, and that she really just wants him to take ownership of his actions, to seek help, to stop running and lying to his audience. The message was clear, and in his response, it seems that Minnie was receptive to this, committing to an indefinite hiatus and using that time to build back the trust of those he wronged. Now, of course, many were hesitant to buy into the sincerity of such a pledge, and with valid reason, but at the same time, it was probably the best we were going to receive, and if he could at least heal some of the wounds that he had inflicted to those in question, then that would be progress. Many people adopted this perspective and wanted Minnie to be better, which is very merciful for the internet that I know. So what would Craig do with this time away? How would he use it to win back the faith lost from many disillusioned followers and even friends?
Hi, how's it going? Hope you're doing good. First thing you probably noticed is the background. I'm back in my old studio.
Well, turns out his break lasted shorter than one might anticipate. In fact, it was on par with the post-tour break he took at the start of the year, and most of this intermission appeared to be occupied with relocating back to Northern Ireland, which is also peculiar given that he'd already moved once at the start of 2020. However, there was an explanation for this.
I went on this mental health journey. I realized that there's a lot going on in the world. And I know I just need to step away, and I know I just need to take care of myself. My mental just took a turn for the worse, and I know I needed to get back. I needed to be around the ones who I love. I wanted to work on myself, my mental health journey. I got myself into therapy for the last month, and it's been incredible. It really has. This has been something that I've been putting off for years because I wanted to make sure work was okay, and I kept up with work, and I just put myself on the back burner. And it made me finally realize that I can't do that anymore. But it's been nice. Reconnecting with my roots, reconnecting with who I am, where I grew up. You know, I moved to Northern Ireland when I was 10 years old. Whenever I was living in Singapore, I came over here, and this has been the place that I call home. I know I just left all of a sudden, but I needed to do something about me.
Right, of course. Going back to his roots to clear his head. This mental health break had clearly revitalized him, and he was ready to start creating content again for his adoring audience. Wait, didn't something happen? Oh, right, yeah. He doesn't really talk about that. Like, at all. In fact, we are met with a 5-minute long slew of rhetoric about how important it is to take care of one's mental health. That he's not perfect, he needed the time out to work on those imperfections, and that he's been improving himself with every passing day. How inspiring.
Like I said before, I'm back in therapy, and she has been incredible, being able to spill everything onto her. And
might want to reconsider the wording on that one, Craig.
Even though this is my first video back, this doesn't mean that I'm gonna just stop working on myself. I've come to realize that the journey of working on yourself isn't just, I'll do it for a few months, now I'll be alright. It's a journey that never truly ends. As humans, there's no definitive amount of time that if you take this amount of time away and work on yourself, you'll be okay again. the reality is this is a journey that myself and all of us are just gonna continue to go through life. And you know, I've come to the realization that no one is ever perfect. You can strive for perfection, but as long as you know that no one is perfect and no one will ever be perfect, and the more you realize that, the better you're gonna be.
In summary, he completely avoids disclosing the reason why he took the hiatus in the first place, and decides that his viewers are better off not knowing. The break was already insultingly short for someone of his status. He could have afforded to take much more time away from the platform that he had misused. But even if we discount that, the fact that he doesn't even have the humility to be honest with his own audience is more than enough evidence that he hadn't learned from his misconduct. He also posted a similar statement to Twitter, which although was less offensive given the fact that his previous apology was also just below it for context, still completely neglected to address any reparations that he had made for his misdeeds, let alone the misdeeds themselves. It was shady as hell, and almost implied that he had this expectation that it would just blow over if he didn't mention specifics.
I have receipts, and I'm gonna show them again, like maybe right here, where he was talking to his moderators about how in mod chat people are gonna see that this doesn't matter and it's gonna die. He'll upload in a week, it'll be fine, nobody's gonna care. You have to be some scumbag with a high enough ego to think that people in your Discord, moderators who looked up to you, are not gonna share those messages with me. Who are just gonna let that slide? No.
Well, actually, it seems that's exactly what he expected after chat logs were sent to Hallie, in which he states that once people realize that the majority of people don't care or don't know and the brands continue to work with him, it'll all blow over, which is some high-grade arrogance on Minnie's front. Much of this is revealed in a video uploaded by Hallie, which served in part as a response to Sir Ladalot's glorious return to YouTube, but also as means to provide her story across all platforms and to make sure it wasn't overshadowed by Minnie's influence. However, there are more than enough new developments which only tarnish his image further, some to astounding degrees.
She basically was told by Craig to go to Ash, one of the other girls who came out, who dealt with way worse, to tell her about his suicide attempt, to make her feel some sort of pity, and then was saying to me, which you'll see now, just how if Ash ever came up about this, she would be the person who's responsible for killing thousands of people, because of if people found out who he was and fans who count on his videos found out about him, they would kill themselves.
It is unbelievable the audacity of this man. So many of his leaked DMs didn't paint him as a person who wanted to know what he could do to atone for his actions, but more what he would do if such evidence went public. It doesn't reflect remorse or regret, and Hallie's video once again showed how manipulative his hiatus and return had been. Yet this time round, it wasn't even subtle. He was basically seeing what he could get away with. It was a sign of an inflated ego which judged his fans as too stupid to hold him to account. On top of this though, it made his utilization of points surrounding mental health seem unbelievably contrived, and brought into question whether he ever believed anything that he said about it.
I appreciate every content creator that came out and spoke and just came out and shared my story, because he is getting away with this pretty easily. His viewers, a lot of them do not know what's going on, and it's not their faults.
Thanks to Hallie's response and other YouTubers covering the situation, publicity of Minnie's antics began to amplify. It became quite clear that he wasn't going to distance himself from the incidents like he had hoped, and he may have no other option but to talk about them. But how would he with such damning receipts against him? Well, let's find out.
How much of a massive ego can you have? How much of a disgusting human being can you be to think you have a right on this platform?
With his first video back, it was initially received decently by those within his committed fanbase. However, with the limelight firmly on his transgressions, the backlash began to augment into its own movement, with its purpose to remove Mini from the platform altogether and to make him pay properly for what he had done. His videos began to accumulate thousands of dislikes as well as critical comments, ranging from disappointed devotees to outraged onlookers. There was no way he could filter this out.
For Mini Lad, I know you're not watching this, but you're only going to make yourself look worse and worse in the eyes of the YouTube audience until you address what you did to YouTube, so that we can see that you'll admit to what you've done.
He would upload another regular video some 12 days later without any recognition towards the mounting pressure against him. However, this was met with even greater hostility from viewers than the previous release, and was indicative that he wasn't simply going to be able to escape this without offering up some explanation. So, come September, there was a new task on the Mini Lad agenda, and that was to clear the air. Now, he had done a similar thing with his upload addressing the separation with Sammy. In hindsight, that video was also flagrantly dishonest, but at a time where people were none the wiser, it served as a sufficient explanation for where he had been and the tribulations that he had faced during this period. This time round, the air was significantly murkier, and there was a lot of seemingly conclusive evidence to confront that even the most eloquent of individuals would have difficulty excusing. However, with few other options, Mini had to put his cards on the table. But was he holding all the aces? Well, no.
Hey guys, I want to talk about a lot of the stuff that's been going on online lately, whether it's through YouTube or Twitter or places like that. I've been reading a lot of your guys' comments as well, and I wanted to formally address everything. But as well as address everything, I want to talk about a lot of the rumors that are out there and debunk some of them too.
The video is 5 minutes long, which is already quite brief given the magnitude of the allegations against him. Okay, sometimes there isn't too much to say, but to be honest, Mini Lad doesn't really say much at all.
Now that some time has passed and I've had time to reflect on everything and get a grand scope of everything that's been going on, I wanted to set the record straight. After this all came out, I did make a statement on this over on my Twitter, but now I think is the correct time to sit down and make a video addressing it.
He's quite sly in how he responds to the allegations. Instead of focusing on what may be true or not, he turns his attention to what he believes is false and chooses to, quote, debunk those. Many of these claims not really constituting the essence of the case against him.
The first thing that I wanted to talk about with these allegations is I've never physically met them before, nor have I physically abused anybody across the board. I want to make people aware of that because those are serious allegations and I wanted to put those rumors to bed.
There are minor admissions here and there, but in some capacities it could be seen as quite a devious play by our miniature man here. He's very selective in what he responds to, and although what he says may well be the truth in these specific circumstances, it's hardly the full picture. For example, on the issue of leaked chat logs regarding some aspects of his hiatus.
Some of my old Twitch mods have been leaking and screenshotting messages that I put in the mod chat where I say that after 2 weeks that I gave up on therapy. I wanted to say that this is untrue. After 2 weeks, I did stop going to a certain therapist because if you've been to therapy before, that you'll know that some therapists just don't fit your needs. So after 2 weeks, I changed to a different therapist, and that's someone who I've been going to see every single week since.
Now, once again, this may be the case. I do not know. However, this doesn't address the messages where Mini Lad appears to dismiss the influence of the accusations against him and judges the severity of them on the basis of the impact they'd have on his career. The hilarious thing is that this video would only be approximately 2.5 minutes long if he hadn't added an extra section where he tackles another claim on Twitter, which he asserts to be false.
This person is accusing me of a few things, so I would like to go through each point individually and debunk them respectively. The first one is a photo that has come out with me and the 2 other YouTubers that are there, where a picture of us holding her in the air has come out. This is a photo taken during a meet and greet at the very end of the summer camp. This is a situation where people are able to come in, they're able to get a photo, they're able to get 1 or 2 things signed, and then they move on. During this, she said that I asked to pick her up. For the photo, she asked if myself and the other YouTubers could hold her up for the photo, so what she's saying here is untrue. The second point she brings up is that I sat too close to her and her friends. This part's quite confusing because everyone sat next to everyone else as a part of regular scheduled programming. At no point was any of us unmonitored, as myself, the other YouTubers that were there, also the fans that were there, but there were also adults there and counselors there monitoring everything. So at no point during this entire summer camp was anybody unsupervised. The third point they bring up is they claim that I call them cute and pretty. This is completely fabricated and I did not say this. This is untrue. Like I said in the previous point, at all times during this camp, we were surrounded by camp workers and counselors to ensure the safety of myself and ensure the safety of them and ensure the safety of everyone else. At all times, they could hear everything that I was saying, so this could not have happened.
I cannot possibly comment on the verity of Minilad's retort here because he has been shown at multiple times to have lied at his convenience. So denying an allegation which doesn't have any physical proof would practically be second nature to the man. However, the incident does give him one last chance to address his malfeasance with Hallie, Ash, and many others as well.
The situation with the other two people that I said on Twitter was a situation where my behavior was unacceptable, and I understand that, and I will continue to strive to do better.
A very mature reflection, Mini. You've really outdone yourself there. Cracking introspection. In spite of this, some people defending him on this point may say, well, Minilad did address this in his Twitter statement. He does reference that as a whole here. We can't expect him to just continuously bring up what he's already admitted to. Maybe this statement is meant to be on the new claims. I could formulate many responses to such perspective. However, probably the most irrefutable one would point towards the fact that he has ignored all new claims that are harder to respond to, such as the dismissive DMs or the screenshots where he basically places the lives of his fans on those he has maltreated. This is extremely selective and it doesn't clear the air whatsoever. He's just added smoke and mirrors.
I outlined it in my original tweet back in June at the bottom, saying that I will be working on myself and I will be attending therapy from now and on into the future, and a lot of people deem that to be untrue, but I wanted to be here on record saying that since then I have been going to therapy every single week and I will continue to go to therapy every single week.
The video also doesn't contain any evidence either. It's just him smiling and asking you to trust him, which people don't. That should have been at least part of the reason that you made the video in the first place. You need to restore people's faith in you, and you can't do that if you provide people with no substantiation to your attestations. He opens the video talking about transparency and setting the record straight, but he fails to do so on every count. This video underlines the main point that he failed to dispel, the pattern of manipulative behavior that has been the driving force behind a lot of his worst offenses. As a matter of fact, it's pretty decisive evidence that his crooked propensities are alive and kicking, and people were fast to identify that.
It's pretty obvious this video is just here to save his career, I guess. And in order to do that, he has to not focus on the real problem and address things that aren't even real or just other allegations that just came out.
Many creators and individuals involved were fast to call Craig out on his maneuvers and inability to show growth in the situation. It was a sign that he was prone to repeating this all over again. This was exasperating, and so many people were incensed that he could even use a video like this to once more try and find a way to evade confrontation. Speaking of evasions, many were beginning to suspect he had other motives for moving back to Northern Ireland as well. Allegedly, he is in Texas now, but it's hard to trust anyone's word at this point.
For me, I've always wanted to use my platform for good. I've always wanted to portray a positive message here. And I know that there's nothing I can say right now that will change your guys' minds, and that's okay. But I hope, looking forward to the future, that whether it's in the coming weeks or the coming months or the coming years, that what I say right now, you can take as the truth.
Regardless, a lesson was being taught. These situations would only escalate with every poorly made response you put out. With more and more attention being brought towards his actions, it was clear that Craig was too ignorant or too fragile to actually properly confront what he'd done. And people weren't just going to let him off the hook by rhetorical inertia. So what could Minilad do under these circumstances? Well, this is where it becomes quite bizarre. In certain situations, there are no preferable options, and as a person who had been caught in a series of half-truths and outright lies, there was no panacea for Minilad's woes. Every option had a variety of drawbacks. Nonetheless, after the deluge of ubiquitous condemnation following his clearing the air video, the smart option would be to leave for a much longer spell and actually use that time to work on himself, or at least pretend to. He has a large subscriber base, and although he had his monetization's complications here and there, he's almost certainly made more than enough to live off. I hope his family would be happy to support him alleviating these glaring infirmities, and if he was actually receiving therapy, then he could take the time out until those results began to show. Nevertheless, he demonstrably had a deep connection to his YouTube channel and wanted to upload again. He wanted this behind him, which wouldn't be possible if he committed to another break. So another option would be to try his luck at addressing the allegations again, this time in a more comprehensive manner. It was unlikely to win too many over, but it may curb some of the malaise that had persisted throughout the situation. However, this would only work if he could make a somewhat coherent case for himself, and with the abundance of evidence against him, many were doubtful of his prospects at effectively justifying or even explaining the mentality behind much of his exploits. So out of these two, the first option did still seem more probable, but little did we know there was an option C, which although not impractical, did seem rather foolish, even to someone of Minilad's present notoriety. That option would be to resume an upload schedule like nothing had happened at all. Yet, this was the option that Mini exercised.
It's been 10 months since the last video. I miss gaming. So that being said, shall we?
Yes, only 8 days after his Clone the Air blunder, he uploads a video called Internet's Craziest Gaming Glitches. I'm not sure if the missed apostrophe is an oversight or a cry for help, but to summarize, in his video, he reacts to the popular subreddit r/gamephysics, imparting priceless insight with his reactions to the titular forum. This video appears to have been recorded while he was still in his previous accommodation, and thus seems to be a planned release. But regardless of when it was made, the Minilad flair was shining through.
Okay. Go on. Big brain, huge brain. That is 4,000 IQ. They bring care packages out on drones? Bro, future crazy.
I'm so glad that Mini has continued uploading, aren't you? What would we ever do with content like this? Though I do sometimes wonder if he was inserting subliminal messages within his text.
In a nutshell, I remember when I was growing up, whenever I was in school, I was always so afraid, like, adulthood seems so scary. Like, even like the year above you, you're like, the older ones, God has forsaken you. I am but a mere squire compared to the year above. And then you think of people when they're like 21, you're like, oh, they have their life together. They're gonna have their own 401k pensions. They're gonna have a wife and kids. And then you get there and you realize that the world has no idea what's going on 95% of the time. As a guy who's 25 years old right now, not a clue. Just remember that going forth in life. You're gonna take away anything from this video, take away this. No one has a clue.
Now, as Minilad videos go, this was nothing particularly different from the routine content that many would have expected from his channel, but there was definitely an element of it which seems strained given the state of affairs. Either Mini didn't actually care for the charges levied against him, or he's contriving a persona to try and cover up the fact that it bothers him. Both of these rationalizations imply that the happy-go-lucky attitude is a pretext for a very cynical ploy to ride out the stigma he was facing. This philosophy was exhibited in the leaked DMs. People forget and move on. That's what he's hoping. When the critics forget, you'll be left with your dedicated audience who are much more interested in your output rather than the actual moral conundrum of viewing someone of that character, and who would want to miss out on the premium laughs like those supplied by Minilad.
Me, I'm an adult, I need to confront my responsibilities. Also me. You got nothing. Good effort, good effort.
Yeah. With that said, his plan didn't quite work out as intended. His Reddit reaction video broke even between likes and dislikes, and future uploads didn't fare much better. His next offering was a Let's Play of Flight Simulator, which, although producing no exceptional in-game moments, did stimulate some pretty hilarious comments. The sort that Minilad would react to, though he hasn't yet. Good idea, Craig, write that one down. That aside, his ratio was much worse on this video, with the likes more than halving and the dislikes actually increasing on the previous upload. His next video didn't show signs of improvement either, although he did secure a sponsorship for it.
It was your job to bring the speaker. You go to your car and you realize the speaker is dead. What are you going to do? Your friends are never going to trust you again. You're never going to get invited out anywhere again. Your life is going to come spiraling down. Oh, Jimmy, with a brand new Cove Commuter 2, you'll never have to worry about that again. With its amazing 7-hour battery life, a subwoofer on both ends to play bangers with volume like this.
What's a volley? I don't know what he's saying.
What more do you need?
However, once people made his partners, Cove, aware of Minilad's capers, the video was removed on the company's request. I almost want to give points for the sheer gall of finding a sponsor to work with in spite of knowing the inevitable backlash the business would face, but I won't because it's Minilad, and Minilad deserves nil points. It seems that with every attempt that Minnie made to elude the critical masses, it merely invigorated them more, predominantly because people saw it for what it was, and they weren't going to forget it just because Minnie Lad wanted them to.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is a mistake.
Every video since followed a similar trend, with users flooding his comments, his ratings, and every conceivable route that may allow Minnie back into the mainstream. YouTube also took it upon themselves to punish him as well, revoking his AdSense partnership, thus preventing him from generating revenue via commercials. The videos themselves are pretty mediocre, the thumbnails make me feel like I'm living in some dystopian nightmare. The shark in this one looks about as fed up as Craig shit as most people are. In his newest video at the time of writing, which will be a long time ago at this point, the hot chip one, the video literally opens with Comic Sans, and once again, not sure if to read that as a cry for help, but Minilab was the only one who could make that move. I wasn't sure how many videos it was going to take for Minnie to realize that the internet denizens weren't letting this one go, and that he's actually suffered far more by putting on this scene. But it was rather awkward and embarrassing for anyone who's aware of the situation, especially former fans, to watch this man who was once respected reduced to an outcast who literally eat hot chip and lie. With every upload, he besmirched his reputation further and obscured his road to redemption. At first, it seemed to be a calculated move to temper the odium towards him, but at a certain point, it just seemed to be a desperate default to familiarity because he couldn't think of anything else.
Everything that we once knew is now gone.
It's tragic for all involved, many of whom just want closure above all, but have to watch this man dance on the grave of his legacy because he's too proud to actually face down his actions. But unfortunately, we can't be overly surprised at this. It's been something present for longer than many have probably considered.
Anymore. Who am I? Who are you? Where am I? I'm gonna go cry into some Ben & Jerry's. I think that's the play. Ben & Jerry's fish food slaps. Yep. I'm gonna just subscribe, okay? Just do that for me. Just the little red button down below. Just the little like button.
However, eventually after numerous further failed attempts to shirk the situation at hand, he had a sudden change of heart.
Hey guys, this video has been a long time coming. And this is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but...
And we finally had something to seriously discuss. The original plan was to release this video at the end of December, as a way to depict Minilad's continuous failure to move past this controversy. However, before I could release it, our friend Craig decided to defy expectations, dropping a video where he appears to tackle the allegations head-on.
I don't want this video to be excused as an excuse or victimizing myself or anything like that. I just want to give you guys my thoughts. This is no more PR teams, no more anything like that. This is just Craig. This isn't Minilad. This is Craig talking, and I want to be as transparent as possible.
In this video, he addresses some of the messages in question, explains his motives, and apologizes profusely. Initially, this was well received by his intimate fanbase. But once again, as other commentators caught wind of it, momentum turned once more against him, for a variety of reasons that I'll briefly talk about now.
You know what I'm saying? Why would you even get into that position in the first place, if we're just being brutally honest here? Like, that's just some weirdo shit to me, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't imagine, like, getting into a relationship or, like, flirting with anyone who's not an adult at this point, bro.
Some of these people responded to him by once more chastising his actions, which isn't wrong, but he's not necessarily defending them in this circumstance. So saying he shouldn't have done it is somewhat redundant because he's not disputing it. Others went in on the evidence that he admitted, such as various comments we've discussed prior that really do not flatter his character in any way. And I generally agree with this stance, given how the comments could definitely be indicative of his own personal attitudes. If he wanted to be fully transparent, he should have included them. However, it's also important to note those comments are primarily self-incriminating in the fact that they are an inadequate way to address his misdeeds, and this video may serve as a fresh attempt to try and reflect on his initial actions, like saving a new Word document over a previous one. I don't necessarily agree with it, but given how others have already pointed it out, I figured I'd approach this upload from a different angle. Now, I'm aware that Minilad has not been particularly honest in confronting his actions, and for many, there isn't much of an incentive to believe the explanations that he provides here. However, for the sake of discourse, I am going to entertain that position and see what can be said for it, and if there are any points of value that can be drawn from his long overdue apology. I am going to listen to Minilad. I'm even going to try and believe him, and attempt to impart some words of wisdom at least.
A lot of people think that these people were random fans that I got in contact with, but both Hallie and Ash, these are people who are my friends. Hallie I've known for a long time, since maybe 2013, 2014. Hallie was one of my Twitch mods. Hallie was a really good Twitch mod. She helped me out, she helped Terrorizer out, she helped a lot of the guys who I played with on our streams, and she was someone that I could go to with my problems. We became close because we both had our issues.
One of the first points that Craig goes in on is this one, the relationship between himself and his accusers. This serves as some context to the discourse surrounding his intent. His point being that he possessed a closer prior relationship with the other individuals involved than many may have assumed in the past. In the context of his actions, if this was true, it would serve to marginally reduce that power deficit between him and those his actions affected, in comparison to that between him and a random fan, for example.
It wasn't until 2016, when she was 17, that I first started to flirt with her. I was 21 at the time, and that's not okay. Like, and I'm aware of that.
It also serves as an indirect assertion for why he may have wrongfully assumed that the people he shared these antics with were mentally prepared to interact with him on that level, and appealed to his ignorance rather than malice.
Ash, to me, I knew a lot shorter. I may only have known her a few months. She was a part of a group of friends who my Twitch mods were friends with, and that's how we became friends. This is someone who I became friends with just through association with my friends, and the stuff I sent to her is just not okay either.
The problem is that although this may be applicable with Hallie, he doesn't really provide it with Ash, which points to one of the most pressing issues regarding this whole shambles. However, Minnie still has explanations for his actions to convey.
If this is my way of putting all my cards on the table and telling you guys what happened, I feel like I need to say it. The reason I did what I did, and there is even a message where I said this, is because what I said there is true. I did try to end my life at the beginning of 2017. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for anything. This is not what this is about. This is telling you guys the reason. And I just want you to understand the headspace that I was in.
Now, a lot of people gave him criticism for this comment, claiming that he was trying to use suicide as a scapegoat. But that's a very shaky argument for me on its own. At the end of the day, we all have mindsets that can affect our actions, and if that was the one that affected Minilad's actions, then so be it. Although what he did was extremely wrong and his position assumes accountability, being an adult does not make you an infallible being. There's no holy grail of wisdom that you sit from people do bad things. It doesn't mean they're eternally damned to be bad people. However, the reasoning behind those actions is invaluable in my opinion, and this is where Minilad's perspective begins to buckle for certain audience members. There are many reasons that I can understand why someone may behave out of order: desperation, deprivation, but I have to admit I find suicide to be a curious rationalization, especially in the context that Mini presents. He doesn't just present the thought as one's impending death as an explanation for his actions, but as a motivation for his actions. This idea that if he was going to go out, then he might as well go out with his greatest vice. But if your own mortality is the only thing keeping you from behaving in such a way, then it just pays more testimony to this idea that you're a self-interested charlatan. Your moral compass shouldn't be based on the consequences that you personally have to face down for your actions, especially given their severity. However, at the same time, he does also acknowledge this not too long after.
The reality is I was being selfish. I wasn't thinking about repercussions. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just being stupid, and I really want to apologize for that. I just wasn't thinking, and I regret it, and I've regretted it since, and for that, for both Hallie and Ash, I'm really sorry.
As a matter of fact, he pretty much admits to having a completely crooked objective in the interactions, which may make some wonder why he tried to humanize it in the first place. The way I see it is once again to mediate his action, to try and distance himself from narratives that may paint him in a more Austin Jones-style predator light, which I don't think he is, although there are some parallels. He wants to make his actions somewhat tangible to his viewers while being suitably self-critical. It's the best balance for a video like this, but it doesn't feel completely compatible, thus meaning it doesn't land for a majority of his detractors and even those who may be sympathetic towards him. Why?
Whenever I saw them coming out with my message, I sent them this. This isn't me. That's not right. It's something that I completely regret. I panicked, I was scared, I didn't know what to do, and I love my job so much that I didn't want it to go away. And I just wasn't right. So to Hallie and to Ash here at the end up, and even to Laura for bringing that up, I'm sorry guys. You were my friends. I failed you. I was only thinking of myself and I was being stupid, and I wish I could take it all back.
Well, there's obviously the case of too little too late, but I think the greater point that it represents is this personal change. As said, I don't think being an adult makes you invulnerable to misconduct, and although it is exceptionally irresponsible given his level of influence, and he is right to be called out for it, your relative size does not make you a fountain of wisdom. I've always advocated a live and learn philosophy. If someone has demonstrated a change in their behavior, evolved, and grown as a person, then I will be the first to back them. The issue is that as a large creator, he already had a relatively small domain to prove growth that may come with evolving life circumstances. But on top of that, he just failed to do so. His failure was what provoked this in the first place. In fact, he only cared when his income began to suffer, and because he attempted to ignore it completely until that point, there's no trust in his word, whether it was coincidence or not. I could believe that he was afraid and scared for his career and everything he might lose. That's an understandable fear. But the fact of the matter is that he lost more by continuing to take advantage of people's charity and showing that he had not changed, whether he was scared or not.
There may be bits and pieces that I missed, and for that I apologize. But I wanted to try and get everything in here.
This is also why he couldn't afford to ignore his previous failures to address it properly and other rather dismissive comments. Now, he does have an explanation for his subpar responses, which he kind of slips in.
I also wanted to add in here that a lot of people think that I haven't apologized to these girls. I had to fight my PR team for this, but in my initial apology on Twitter, I said that I would privately message an apology, separate apology to these women. And that's what I did.
This idea of the PR team. Now, I've heard of these PR teams, out-of-touch lawyers and the rest, and they can really provide genuinely garbage guidance because they probably learned from the playbook of O.J. Simpson, which is a whole different arena. However, once again, it's hard to say if this is just a scapegoat, and even if it isn't, you've got to have some strength of character to not rely on other people to get you out of a mess you put yourself in. You didn't need a PR team to solicit explicit content, so what is the difference here? I feel for many this illustrated the crux of the matter, how much of it rode on how people interpreted Minilad's own character in the sincerity of his actions. He admits that he behaved terribly and manipulated many people whom he shouldn't have. He's worked on himself, but I think his failure to address it has made his actions look even more incriminating. People do shitty things, make bad decisions, enter toxic dynamics. The thing is, many people do it because they either don't know better or their judgment has been impaired by other factors to the point where they have a reduced capacity to understand the possible ramifications that their behavior may entail. However, there are key nuances here that do make Minilad's behavior exceptional, and whether people can articulate it or not, they know it's there. As a large creator, he targeted and became involved with people who had a specific servitude to him prior. Now, as expressed, he did have pre-existing friendships with these people in a way, and I can understand why he wanted to clarify that, because that can yield attachment sometimes that lose context of significant details, particularly online. It does challenge this idea that he was pursuing people for the sole reason that they were underage. However, this explanation is only really remotely sympathetic if it was based on genuine feelings he possessed, which, as much of the evidence and his own elaboration shows, really wasn't. He didn't have feelings for these people. He could have had anyone's attention for such images, which makes his actions seem even more dirty and opportunistic. When it comes to his behavior towards his victims, he basically coerced what he needed out of them and dipped. That's conscious sexual exploitation. Their judgment was already impacted by their own affection towards him, and his judgment, although possibly limited by his then present mentality, was merely influenced to disregard the well-being of those he affected. He often did speak down to them, and reading the DMs, even without the rest of the context, it is somewhat discomforting. The fact that he behaved in this way specifically undermines any possible context that friendship could provide. His video also skirts around his most serious misdeeds and frames it as mostly flirting. And although his interactions may have primarily occupied that category, the more severe individual incidents supersede any of the more minor ones. Frequency of occurrence in this case is a secondary factor.
My PR team said not to message them, but these were my friends, and I thought it was right that they deserved their own private apology.
Minilad was purposeful with intent, and that's the most damning feature. He manipulated people for his own gratification. There was nothing sincere about his actions. So when he puts his failures in responding down to a dysfunctional PR team, is not trustworthy, because this PR team appears to have advised him to maintain the same pattern of behavior that landed himself in this mess in the first place, a pattern of behavior he should have corrected a long time ago. He credits himself for defying his PR team by messaging apologies to those his actions affected, but he can't say those messages were were written with sincere intent when they were sent months after he was first called out in August and done while he continued to refuse to address the actual requests of those he affected. Minilad's actions were exacerbated by his character, an arrogant yet fragile ego which fed on the validation of people who were too blinded by their own perception of him. If Craig had been similarly deluded and cleaned up his act, then there may be a case for him, but as it is, it seemed indicative of his character. He may genuinely be regretful now, but it also may be a case of not realizing what he had until it was gone. At the same time, it could just be another case of his manipulation. So let's talk about that.
YouTube is my life. I've been doing it full time for 7-8 years now. I've been, the Minilad channel is 10 years old next year, and it's all I know. It's what I love. It's my passion. It's what I wake up every day and I love to do. And I realized over the last even few years that I just haven't put the love and attention into it than, what I want. I want it to be like a portfolio of the cool things that I've done, and I want to rekindle myself. I want to find out who I am. Not Minilad, not anything like that. I want to find Craig.
In spite of your criticisms, when you finish watching his apology video, it's easy to feel a bit more closure with regards to the situation. And many did. Even those involved, such as Hallie, asked those hawking Minilad to move on. After all, he has done what was asked of him by those his actions affected. In some ways, the video may make you feel more inclined to trust that this time he's genuine in his desire to change. From that perspective, it would be fair to leave it behind. However, it could easily just be another calculated move, one that he's pulled before, and I think it's fair to keep an eye on that, for if he ever decides to return one day.
If there's one thing from this that I want to be a clip, is this. I am so fed up and tired. Honestly, I'm so fed up and tired of seeing all these drama channels doing stories and giving the wrong information in the story.
On June the 10th, just a couple of weeks before much of what would lead us to where we are today would transpire, Minilad had released another apology, this one towards Terrorizer. In the statement, he expressed regret for what he said and desire to rebuild the friendship they once had. This was met with praise from many within the community. However, one person appeared to refrain from accepting this offering of peace, Terrorizer himself. Following the rather heated exchange at the end of August, Brian had mostly rebuffed any attempt at settlement between the two parties, in spite of Minnie's pleas and claims that the hatchet had been buried. At points, he had even been characterized as stubborn or unreasonable due to his unwillingness to reconcile with his former companion. However, I think he was completely within his rights to decline any step towards rapprochement, because this didn't seem to be a case of differing perspectives. This was a situation where someone publicly and knowingly attacked a person on a very sensitive subject in a way that could have harmed multiple relationships. We all snap sometimes and say things that we probably shouldn't. However, our friends will appreciate that they probably came from a place of emotion. Emotionally driven perspectives may be irrational but will reflect what someone perceives in the moment. It was very hard to see how Minilad could have interpreted the situation in the way he presented it, and therefore with Brian's context, he couldn't read it as anything other than pernicious point scoring. It was emotional manipulation because Minilad presented his case in calm, reasoned good faith while making multiple claims that were dubious at best and malicious at worst.
Just thinking about that whole thing pisses me off. Right, can we move on? Let's move on. All right, let's not talk about stupid drama.
Terrorizer was just another victim of this, but people didn't see it that way until the extent of Minnie's manipulation became clear.
I felt so fucking terrified. I was just trying to be a good friend. And I thought that's what he thought I was, but all I was a goddamn tool. A goddamn tool to keep anybody from knowing who he truly was.
The allegations that proceeded nearly a fortnight after his apology to Brian didn't just serve in exposing Minilad's indecency, but also as further evidence for the degree of puppetry he was employing to solicit what he desired, even if that material in question was illegal. People would argue over the age of consent and so on, the differences in certain states and countries. Setting aside the point that the age of consent doesn't parallel the laws regarding exchange of explicit images in many places, it's not just that detail at play here. It's the fact that he actively pursued younger fans who looked up to him and used his influence to acquire content that they otherwise would not have consented to giving. A lot of people focus on the sexual nature of what he did, which is definitely a factor, but I think his actions are also implicative. Not in that he's some serial pedo, but more that he exploited people to solicit something he desired, which was aggravated by the nature of the content. Even the twit longer emphasizes manipulation. Hell, what further provoked people to come forward was the result of a consensual relationship with another adult. The concern wasn't just that Minilad had a bad habit or a bad addiction, one that he may well have left behind, but that he was a fundamentally broken person who refused to fix himself. He knew he was doing that, and he knew exactly how to present himself in a way that would appeal to various emotional frailties. When confronted, he once more appealed to their pity and sympathy, pledging to seek help and support and reinforcing the fact that he was a changed man. The saddest thing is that people like Hallie held off on going public because they genuinely believed this. They knew the internet would be hostile and they wanted to give Minnie a chance to have a career in spite of his actions. But he manipulated them on this as well. And when it became apparent to them that he had behaved no differently in his previous relationships, they knew there was no other option. The internet was hostile, but when Minnie put out his response admitting to his malefaction and promising the rectification that would be incumbent on him, many actually did respond somewhat optimistically, stating that although his actions were terrible, they hoped he'd receive the help he needed. However, this post would prove to be only the start of the greatest yet most transparent manipulation. As of now, the largest proverbial middle finger to all those his actions affected.
If I leave the house, that means I'm not able to work on my videos and I'm not able to work on this thing and that thing, and it became such a mind game that I lost myself. And it's hard to admit, but it's the reality of it. I lost myself, but I'm happy to say that I'm regathering it. I'm finding my roots again.
A pair of recorded statements that would attempt to deceive his fans into thinking that his hiatus was actually inspired by the need to find himself, and that many of the allegations were misguided or ill-founded, in spite of the fact that many of that which he focused on did not come close to aggregating the crux of the matter, once more revealing his duplicitous nature and provoking further backlash.
It's terrible. And the fact that we got 5 minutes of no genuine, feelings through that whole thing. As a person who knew him, or thought I did, yeah, that didn't seem very goddamn genuine.
This led to what can only be regarded as a content implosion of unprecedented scale, consistently being harangued from all angles and growing more and more pathetic with the passage of time, highlighting this desperation. Whether it was arrogance, ignorance, or something that we don't know, he was essentially adding a coat of paint to a train wreck. Maybe manipulation is all he knew. Maybe it's all he's ever known. Watching him game and laugh like nothing was going on was arguably more annoying than anything else for those he's wronged. And it brought into question all the times he's claimed to care, and the times he's used those narratives to provide him with greater moral gravitas. Some people point towards his charity work as if it defends his character, but with the current circumstances considered, I think it only entrenches the fraud. It made every good action seem contrived for self-serving purposes. It made Minilad's existence seem manipulative. If Minilad really cared so much about the fans whose lives were on the line in those DMs, he would have gone out of his way to prove he was a good person and to rebuild that lost faith.
Let him know. Y'all thought you were done with me, huh?
Yeah, enjoy that award, you prick. It's the last one you're gonna get. I'm sorry. I've dealt with a lot of miscreants on this channel, and many of them have done terrible things. But a lot of the time, I don't find myself hating them for what they've done, but more how they respond when finally having to confront their actions. The hubris, the insolence, the absurdity. Minilad is the epitome of moral desertion under fire. If people showed that they had improved or that they were working on themselves, although it may be hard to look at them in the same way you did before, you can at least feel hope that they might find themselves or support them on that journey and return to being a positive force in people's lives at some point in the future. There's no hope here, only whatever you call this.
You motherfucker, you better not keep it within the minutes you're running to me. 100% of you is a 50% of me, and better fucking finish you, bitch. You're available on battle.
Minilad says he's been seeing a therapist, and I'm genuinely glad. However, I hope his hiatus this time will be more serious than any previous ones undertaken, and I hope his therapist and those around him emphasize this, because it seems to me that he's still got a bit of a way to go on this journey, and these videos are hardly instrumental to that. I say this with the proviso that his therapist is real and it's not just another story, but looking at his past, this can sometimes feel like wishful thinking, and that's a shame.
Walking around casually. Then you got these guys. You want my penis?
Being caught up in the past is like being caught in quicksand. The more struggling you do, the more it seems to consume you. But you can't just escape it at your own convenience. You need someone to help you out.
Please, please. I just want to win. I just really, really want to win.
Minilad spent many years ascending the YouTube hierarchy and amassing a loyal fanbase. However, his position below Vanoss always motivated him to aspire for a greater role as an independent creator. In many ways, he wanted to disconnect from that association. He wanted to leave the past behind. However, it wasn't just that. He wanted to enshrine his status as an individual, and in my opinion, outshine his erstwhile colleagues. Now, in many regards, these two objectives aren't in opposition to each other. Many would argue that actually crafting your own identity is part of moving forward as a creator. However, I think looking at his old comments, there was an insecurity, a desire to be something greater for the sake of it, a necessity to prove himself at any expense. With many of his accomplishments, Mini appeared to be heading in the direction of writing himself into the YouTube history books as an unequivocal force for good, his work for charity receiving widespread recognition and acclaim. However, whether due to circumstances or complacency, the mask began to slip.
All they did was play Fortnite and Gmod and then talk shit about other YouTubers.
In this reflection of his past, he showed that whether he had changed in status, his character hadn't really followed. What many may perceive as trash talk may just have been another underhanded attempt to sway audiences away from those he used to be close to. In the drama with Terrorizer that his comments subsequently precipitated, he showed that he had a much greater interest in his image rather than the truth, using people's limited perspective on past circumstances to twist the version of events and capitalize on people's sympathies. After being caught out in his ploy, he changed his tone, switching to one about moving forward, in spite of his failure to sufficiently convince his old friend that was really what he cared about. This is because, to move forward, you have to believe that the person has changed from their past self, and the simple truth was that Minilad hadn't. And in the following year, this was proven time.
I went on this mental health journey.
And time.
She would be the person who's responsible for killing thousands of people.
And time.
I wanted to set the record straight.
Again. In his videos after the allegations, Mini tried to implant this narrative into the viewers' minds about journeys and personal progress, while simultaneously failing to acknowledge what he was meant to be progressing from, using the general distaste of concepts like cancel culture in attempting to override the shock value that detailing his actions may provoke. At the start, I said that we all want to move on from our past, and we don't want it held over us. That remains true, and I'll always defend someone who I legitimately believe has changed their ways. But I also said, if we don't acknowledge it, then we are prone to repeating it. In many ways, Mini showed that the past was still present, and that he hadn't grown nor learned from his previous abasement, utilizing the narratives, but failing to respect their meaning. The allegations weren't just their own indictment of Minilad's behavior, they were a test of his character, and he flunked them miserably. This was a situation where he had used his power as a YouTuber in multiple ways. It was crucial to his status as a public figure that he cleared the air, yet he failed to do so. In fact, he only polluted it more. This is why people didn't move on. This is why people were vocal. There were so many willing to give Mini a second chance, including those close to him, but he just tried to distance himself from the consequences while projecting the exact same behavior that screwed over so many people previously. It seemed he was hoping he'd tire out all those who were trying to maintain the heat, and possibly even provoke sympathy from those who may not have felt favorably towards the continuing backlash. But it was all to no avail. Eventually, he did address the allegations against him more directly, but it was hard to trust his word because it felt like his hand was forced. If no one had ever applied that pressure, would he have continued to ignore it? That's a very important question.
Didn't know where I was going,
I didn't try and make anything of it. Damn, my only goal I ever had on YouTube is I wanted to hit 100 subscribers. Now the channel's on nearly 6 million. This one's on 1.3. I wanted to hit 100. That's all I wanted. And you guys came along and you changed my life infinitely. And for that, I'm forever grateful. For every single person watching this video. That means you saw this video, you clicked on it, and you support me in that. And I thank you for that.
If what's spoken about today makes you feel sad or disappointed as a former or present fan of his, then that's okay. You're not a bad person for having looked up to someone who you thought was a good person. It's just important to not allow yourself to be trapped in that past romanticization of what you thought that person was. Minnie has used his reputation and how people admired him to hold others hostage, and you deserve to be more than ammunition for a narcissist, bloated ego. At the same time, if you want to help him make that change, like he says he wants to at this point, then I can't stop you on principle. It's not my job as a viewer or spectator to tell you exactly what he thinks right now. And I don't think anyone losing everything they have for the rest of their lives gonna help with rehabilitation. But know that it has to be a highly cautious investment because his track record shows he's taken advantage of what he's been given far too often. As for Minnie, I'll leave the internet to decide what they want to do with him. Many want him off the platform altogether. Some want him to face charges. But to be honest, whatever the outcome, the blame falls squarely at his feet. It's not something he's going to be leaving behind. Past, present, or future, this reality reveals that Mini Lad perhaps never cared about all those he claimed to. And that may be the greatest letdown. He tied himself to the point of mental health, claiming to be a friend, doing all these wonderful things. Yet behind the scenes would use the association to merely protect the facade and silence those who wanted to tear it down. The Mini Lad saga is probably one of the most disheartening stories to cover because I think so many expected better and extended compassion towards him with the hope that he would be better. But Mini only cared about what people thought rather than how they felt. He recognized how many viewed him and used it for his own gratification. He saw those ready to speak out and engineered silence. He exploited a sympathetic audience but failed to extend the same sympathy to those his actions affected. The one thing he could never seem to do was the right thing, and that's the single consistency I'll give him credit for. Mini Lad is the personification of 2020, a continuous cycle of the open expectation of improvement, followed by disappointment when we realize the true extent of the depravity. It is depressing, and in times like these, it is easy for the stress to make one reminisce. At the start, I spoke about returning to the bygone days, a time where there were fewer worries, everything seemed simpler.
I want this space, this channel, this area to be somewhere that people can come in and feel welcomed and they can leave with a smile on their face and be happy. That's all that I want.
In Mini Lad's clearing the air video and his subsequent apology, he showed a yearning for that himself, a desire to restore that ethos with his channel, and in a way this may have been followed through in certain uploads. However, for audience members, you can't do that until you've shown that you were the person that people thought you were before. It changed the meaning of the content. They were no longer the feel-good escape for some, they were part of the ordeal. People weren't smiling, the facade was incontrovertible, and many had to drop the act and realize that this would not wash. It was no longer the same. Times change, but it's not always the things around that change, more so our knowledge of them. The past Mini Lad was the present Mini Lad. We unfortunately or fortunately just know more now. And whether you still wish to go back to a time of blissful ignorance, you're at the end of the video. So that's not an option. Apologies.
I don't expect daffodils and rainbows after this. I want it to be raw. I want you guys to build up trust in me over time, and I want to be able to make videos that I'm proud of, and I want to be able to be better, and that's what I wanted to say.
So that's the end of the video. Woo, I'm here, I'm alive still. I want to give big thanks to my editors. They're probably somewhere in existence right now, having a nice, maybe not so nice day, and send them some love if you can. I'll leave their links in the pinned comments. Big thanks to the patrons. Patrons, I've got that word right now. The $10 patrons are on screen currently. I'd like to give a big thanks to my $50 Patreons: Samhala Baloo, Caroline, Hypercube, Amanda, Tree, Arlen Bradley, Goth Cream Puff, Katias.jpg, Anka Umala, and Angela M. Garton. Your support is eternally appreciated. A very, very special thank you also to Marlo, my $100 patron. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. It's great to have you on board. I'd also like to give a big thanks to artists whose art is featured in this video. Artists used on the channel are generally credited as well in the pinned comments, and if your art is used and you'd like credit for that, then you can contact me on my email. I don't really have too much else to add. My socials, as always, will be in the bottom of the pinned comment or somewhere around there. I know, depends what I'm doing, but yes, I don't really have too much else to add. I hope you guys have a good day. Take care. I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.